So to speak a little bit more about how Google is thinking about those hero use cases, I'd like to invite up Yossi Matias, who is a VP of Search and AI at Google. In addition to running Google's R&D center in Israel, he's also a founding executive sponsor for the AI for Social Good program and for the Launchpad Accelerator program, with which this program is a part of. We're pleased to have him here today. Yossi, welcome to the stage.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a great opportunity to meet many of you here. So I'm really excited about this for multiple reasons. So, with AI is really transforming many things in our lives. And obviously, it's going to impact our businesses. It's going to impact many aspects out there. And with that also comes a great responsibility. And obviously, we're talking a lot about how to do it responsibly. And I know this is going to also be discussed here today. But to me, one of the biggest opportunities with AI is really to address some societal problems and help solve people's real problems in life. And even though I'm a computer scientist, I'm excited about the science, the technology, the innovation. But I'm mostly excited about the impact we can actually use in technology to really impact people's life. And that's actually where the AI for Social Good program is kind of meant to give us a little bit of more focus into some of these problems. And to do that in a way that can help out various kind of teams and people around the world to do that. So to give a little bit of context of where we're coming from to this program, and when we're thinking about AI for Social Good, we came to think about it in two pillars. In the pillar of what can we do within the company, within Google, with our teams, and I'll say a few more words about that, but also how can we work with the community, with the ecosystem to actually have the bigger impact. So let me actually start with a little personal lens into one area that I ended up spending quite a bit of effort over the years, which is around how to use technology to help people during crisis. What we see here is really a picture I took with my phone. It was a Nexus One phone, actually, believe it or not, 10 years ago. And this was taken from our office. Our offices in Israel are in Tel Aviv and Haifa. I was in the Haifa office. There was a big fire in the Carmel Mountain, which actually the biggest one that anybody can remember, devastating disaster there. And it was really concerning. I was actually looking in the internet to see what kind of information can I find. What's going on? Should I evacuate the office? Who's at risk? I couldn't find any useful information until eventually I called the mayor's office. I got some phone number that the police had set up with some helpful information and a URL that they started putting up some information. So I actually asked our search team, let's see if we can actually make this information available to anybody else who's looking for the same information, and I was not alone. In fact, if you look at Google Trends, which shows popularity of searches, that's a peak of search for people looking for the same thing that I was looking at, and nobody could find the information. In just a couple hours, actually, the information was out there for anybody to see, and by the way, one of the lead engineer working on that at some point sent a note, hey, somebody else is going to take over because I need to evacuate my home. So he was literally coding under fire. But this was a kind of an inspiration to see, well, technology, if we put it right and we gather the right information and make it available to others, it can actually help keep people safe. And fast forward, over the years, we've seen many situations where people during crisis are looking for information. So, for example, during the attacks in Paris, or during floods, or during earthquakes. And every time this happens, people are coming to look for information. And to that end, actually, we use technology in order to put it together. So just a few years ago, we set up a team, which we call Crisis Response. We launched within Google Search a feature called SOS Alerts, which is out there whenever there's a major crisis with the helpful information of what's going on, where is it, what should I be doing. Unfortunately, there's no lack of crisis. So in just last few years, we had over 250 activations with over 2 billion people watching this kind of information and finding them quite helpful. Sometimes the kind of feedback we're getting is the type of, hey, this information actually might have saved my lives. However, in the process, and this is really bringing together information which is core, of course, to what we're doing in search and at Google. But as we are doing that, we also discovered there are gaps. There are some situations where we actually don't have all the information. And perhaps the most devastating natural disaster is the disaster of floods. So floods actually are estimated to impact, to be responsible for more than 6,000 fatalities per year, impacting millions of people with billions of economic damages. Now, there are some things that can be done, some things that cannot be done on floods, but there's something which is very clearly can be helpful in at least diminishing some of the damages and saving lives, which is giving some heads up about floods. Enabling people, having people the information, hey, floods is coming your way, and it's with sufficient confidence for you to actually evacuate on time and help the authorities to do that. And there was a gap. Actually, we just didn't have this information. And it wasn't clear where we can actually have it. So to that end, we actually put a small team, in fact, a single engineer at first for a few months to see whether we can use machine learning to help out with this flood prediction, which is a very difficult problem because there are so many parameters. And when I say prediction, it's not about, well, we know that there may be floods coming this way because people don't take action if this is the case. We actually need to know in this particular location, there's 90% probability that there's going to be flood. So that's time to take action. Now, I was actually a little surprised that there was enough progress to actually move the needle on that. And in fact, we managed to see that we can actually have prediction with the right combination of many ingredients. What we've found out is that if you can bring it information, which includes flood hydraulic simulations, with cloud computation, with thousands of simulations on the cloud, sometimes even using TPUs, which are the tensor processing units, putting together with what we call data elevation models, which are essentially the topography of the rivers, as we compute them very accurately using aerial images, using, again, machine learning, combined with information we're actually getting from the Indian government, for example, which is collecting information on an hourly basis about what's happening. And interestingly enough, the way in which we're doing the computation sometimes is that people are actually getting on a boat into a river with some measurements that are measuring the depth and velocity of water, putting on a piece of paper, going back to the office, making a call, somebody's typing it in. This flows into systems that are actually using all these thousands of simulations and calibrations. And eventually, we managed to see that we can actually get 90% accuracy if we do it right. So a year and a half ago, during the monsoon season in this small area in Patna, which has many floods quite a bit, we actually launched the first kind of pilot for an alert, which shows you with 90% accuracy where exactly the flood is there. And once you get it, once you know about it, you can actually take action because this alert is about what's going to happen a few hours from now. And this actually was motivating enough to invest in that and put a team to actually start extending it. So a year later, in last monsoon season, we already covered times 12 the area of previous year, and we sent over 1 million notifications to people at risk along the Ganges. This can be life-saving. Now, to me, this is a kind of an inspiration because if you'd asked me 2.5 years ago if we can do anything about flood forecasting, flood prediction, I would say, well, not sure. And I was actually putting together all these efforts, using all these techniques, turned out to be quite significant and making the change, and actually a change that could be material to people's life. And this is the kind of stuff that I think to remember. Sometimes some of the most difficult problems are ones that until we actually get there, we're not sure whether or not we can solve them. But I'm actually very optimistic that in many cases we are going to actually find a way to solve them. A few weeks ago, or a few months ago, I was actually visiting the Patna area. So what we see here, this is a village that was actually washed out overnight. So middle of the night, the riverbank kind of broke, the water came about. There were several casualties. In fact, there would be many more unless for this fellow standing next to me, which he single-handedly actually saved about 20 people or so. So this was actually to see the families which are now stranded and lost some of their loved ones is just a motivation of what we can do with technology to actually help. And again, what you can see in the impact on floods, and this is all kind of in India along the same area, where areas where the water actually came a few feet above the head of where you would standing. And this is just to appreciate the impact of that. And the ability to use technology to actually save out would be quite significant. So this is about one area where using technology can actually save lives, which is around keep them safe and more. Another area which I'm really excited about, how AI is changing people's life, is about what I would call generally conversational AI. And when we talk about conversational AI, I think about it as a general term of how to use the general technologies to have conversations. And of course, when you think about it, this is one of the aspirations of AI from the early days. How many of you are Trekkies, Star Trek fans? Okay, so of course, this has been there forever. The idea we can talk to a computer. Alan Turing, of course, in his seminal work, already asked the question, can we actually have a conversation in a way that would be close to what we have with human? And actually, kind of as a reminder to that, this is kind of an experience I had a year ago or so in the mountains of Rwanda. I had the opportunity to be with the gorillas' natural habitat, spend an hour or so within near a family, and really appreciated the interaction. So you can actually see how they communicate with each other, which is pretty amazing. And they are actually used, they have 1 hour per day to have visitors, so actually they get used to it. And actually, as you can see, they didn't even pay attention to me. And some people ask me, how dare you go to that alpha male? And I said, don't worry, this is actually the guy who lost the election. So. But anyway, talking about conversational AI, this is a reminder for a very famous gorilla called Coco, who became famous. She actually learned more than 1,000 words in, or a vocabulary of 1,000 signs in sign language, and over 2,000 English words. And she became famous. This took her about 40 years, and she made a cover, I believe, of National Geography, etc. And so it's actually fascinating, the notion of communication, the actual communication happening between gorillas, and how can we teach the gorillas. And of course, the intriguing question is, to what extent can we actually teach computers to communicate? To what extent can we use that? And how can it benefit us? So I think that we are in a stage that conversational AI is really going to be transformative in many ways on how we communicate with technology, how we communicate with other people, how do we access the information. Let me give a few examples. So first, the facilitation for that is really the huge advancements we're making on various components, which are, and what we have here is really just a simplistic approach of some of the modules that are part of what we would facilitate conversational AI. So obviously starting with the automatic speech recognition, with text-to-speech on the other hand, with the ability to take the automatic speech recognition and understand what is discussed. At the other hand, how to have fusion of sentences to actually talk in a way which makes sense. How to have interaction. And more of how to understand the context in order to have the right conversation, et cetera, et cetera. And there are some technologies which are really important, such as how to have the understanding of what's being said. So now, of course, we have, many of you are maybe familiar with the BERT, which is a huge milestone in understanding of language and taking context into consideration in a way that is so effective that it's already transforming many situations. Or even more system-wide considerations, such as, well, do we need to run it all in the cloud? Can we run it on device? In order to do that, of course, we need to take machine learning models and shrink them and put them on the edge, on the device. So this actually got into a stage that is beyond research. This is now deployed. So let me give a few examples of things I'm really excited about. Actually, all of them are kind of worked on by my team along with many other teams. So, for example, just to highlight a few, there's the duplex. Some of you may have heard about it. Is technology that can actually make a phone conversation and actually make a full task executed by talking with the human. What we already have actually out there, some of you may have used it, is to actually ask Google to get a restaurant reservation, and in case there's no online reservations set up for the restaurant, actually the system may do the call for you and just let you know a reservation has been made. Or Euphonia, which is really about Dimitri, who's shown in the picture. He's a research scientist at Google who has a speech impairment because he became deaf as a young child. And we looked into, can we train speech recognition models to understand him in a way that otherwise is our systems otherwise cannot. And now he actually gives talks worldwide with that, and this is actually talking for him. And so forth. So live caption, for example, actually enables anybody, including deaf people, or anybody who cannot hear the phone for any circumstances, to actually read a caption in real time. So think about the accessibility to information out there. Call screen, how many of you used call screen? Okay, call screen is a feature which is one of the popular on the phones that allows you to never talk to telemarketing again, so people love it. Essentially using basic AI in order to really understand who's calling, what it's about, etc. By the way, as a fun fact, this is an idea of my wife. When we spoke about conversational AI, she asked me, why can't you solve this problem for me? and I'll give another and now one of the nice things about innovation is that sometimes all you need is one person who identifies a problem and comes up with a passion to solve it. So let me give one such example. And this is about Sapir, who's an engineer. She was working on search at Google, and she came to me one day and said, I'm really passionate about search, but I'm also even passionate about solving problems for real, for accessibility problems. And one thing that she had in mind is she was talking with a friend who's deaf, and he expressed his frustration for not being able to make a phone call. He had to ask favors for that. So she said, well, perhaps I could take a call screen and expand it and have it a full phone conversation. So I help people type in with Smart Compose and Smart Reply and being able to have a full phone conversation. So the following is actually kind of a prototype for this, which is underway. But essentially, it's a phone call where one side is talking, the other side is just typing and reading.
Hi, this is Nicole's Assistive Chat. She'll see what you say, and her responses will be read back to you, starting now.
Hi, Nicole, it's Jamie. How are you?
Hey, Jamie. I'm good, and you?
Great. Are we still on for your 1 p.m. haircut tomorrow?
Sorry, can you do 3 p.m.?
Yes, I can do 3 p.m. We have a lot to catch up on. I want to hear all about your trip.
Perfect. Thumbs up.
Great. See you tomorrow. Bye.
So just imagine that you don't need to be able to hear or to speak in order to have an ordinary phone conversation with anybody. And by the way, you could do that in a different language. We translate. So think about it. This is really how conversational AI is really removing barriers of modality, barriers of languages if needed, etc. And this is, I think, transforming to many people. Now, these are two examples. And going back to social good and how we came to do that. So this was really about putting together, and a few years ago, we kind of sat together and asked, how can we more programmatically look into some of these technologies and see how we can support them? And there are so many other ways. So for example, retinopathy, diabetic retinopathy is an area that is already helping out people to not lose their eyesight. We can look into biodiversity efforts about how to help using AI in order to save. And to that end, as I mentioned, around crisis, around earthquake prediction, which is another area we're looking into, and so forth. And again, there are exciting things that we can do, but there are also exciting things that anybody in the world can do. This is an inspiring story about these two high schoolers who decided to take some TensorFlow libraries and put some makers kind of hardware and put some devices to help out identify fire risk. And now their technology is deployed by CAL FIRE to actually help out minimize risk. So this was an opportunity for us to actually work with the community, and it's part really of our culture to work with the community at large, startups, VCs, government, etc. And in fact, one such effort that I'm really excited about is Launchpad, mentioned earlier, and you worked with Launchpad. Launchpad actually started in Israel some 7 years ago and then expanded globally. And interestingly enough, one thing we discovered with Launchpad is that people got a lot of value from mentorship. For example, on UX, this was always an important one, which is all about, at the end of the day, technology is all about how to make it useful to our users. And I was just hearing it that even today, when a lot of our focus actually expanded into using machine learning, still user interface is an important aspect of that. And indeed, while we started it with early stage startups, now we are focusing on how to help with the machine learning mentorship to startups around the world. Let me also mention that we recently announced a Google for Startup Accelerator, that's actually the new name for Launchpad, on sustainability development efforts in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, which is another opportunity for us to use mentorship for supporting that. So with that, let me just close on the Impact Challenge that we are here to celebrate today. And again, I can't emphasize how excited I am about this initiative and to hear about the representation from all these areas. And obviously, from a Google perspective, the opportunity to actually bring together so many of our teams across the company to support that. We're really all excited about it. And viewing all the projects which are here, I was so thrilled to see the representation of all the important categories, anything from health to education to communication to accessibility and so forth, and to hear about some of the value that startups were getting here. And I know we'll hear more about it from that today. And I'm looking forward to meet many of you later today. And again, I think that to me, one of the most exciting aspects is that not only innovation can come from anybody, but we are in this point in history that essentially every team or every individual and small team can actually identify a problem, take technologies, and with the right kind of approach and focus and sometimes support, can really develop solutions that are going to impact people's life in a positive way, which I think is a huge privilege and is a very exciting point in our history. Thank you very much.